I was 34 years old, director of risk management, and I honestly believed I'd married the perfect man. Mark was a handsome French-American tech entrepreneur, charming and brilliant in all the right ways. We'd only been married 8 months, and now we were house hunting near the coast outside Charleston, South Carolina, the day everything changed. We were standing inside a 2-story white house with a gray shingle roof in a quiet, upscale neighborhood. The place looked ordinary at first glance, almost boring. The Realtor, a stylish Frenchwoman named Camille Moreau, greeted us on the porch. We shook hands, exchanged polite hellos in English, and then, the moment she turned toward the front door, Mark slipped into French. His tone dropped into something easy and conspiratorial, like they were suddenly alone. He clearly believed his beautiful, clueless American wife didn't understand a word. He was wrong. My name is Elise Steele, and my entire career is built on seeing risk before anyone else does. At 34, my life was an orderly spreadsheet. Director of Risk Management at Meridian Cove Capital in Charleston. My days were numbers, models, stress tests, clean forecasts. I knew how to calculate the probability of a disaster and how to prevent it. Mark had been the one glorious deviation in that controlled world. At 38, he was the perfect package, charming, polite, a genuinely gifted cook. He could make a French-style chicken and wine stew that tasted like it came out of a Paris restaurant. He had this easy charisma that could sell anything to anyone. I thought he was the variable who added warmth to my life without blowing up my stability. Lately, my focus had narrowed down to one dream: a real home. Not another apartment, not a temporary rental, but a house with a small yard near the coast where I could finally plant the heirloom roses I'd always wanted, and maybe get a golden retriever, a place that felt like our fort against the world. Mark, who had never cared much about real estate, suddenly produced a listing he stumbled across, 25 minutes from downtown, near the water. "Exactly what you want," he'd said, smiling. "We should see it this afternoon." So here we were. From the outside, the house was fine, white siding, gray roof, nice porch, a little too generic for my taste. But when we parked, I caught Mark's reflection in the side mirror. His eyes were bright, too bright. There was a sharp, almost greedy excitement there that did not match his casual grin. Camille's English was excellent, but flavored with a thick French accent. The moment the introductions were over, Mark slid into French like he was slipping into a favorite coat. "This place is beautiful," he told her in French, praising the exterior. Camille's shoulders relaxed. Her smile shifted from professional to familiar. She responded in the same language, inviting us inside. I followed them in, smiling vaguely, pretending to be the slightly lost American wife who can't follow the conversation but loves the smell of jasmine in the humid air. What Mark didn't know, and what I had deliberately never told him, is that I had lived in Lyon for 2 years in my 20s on a graduate exchange program. I speak fluent French. I can read contracts in French. I can think in French. That part of my life was my locked vault. It came from pain, from betrayal. I didn't share it casually, and I especially didn't share it with a husband I still hadn't fully learned to trust at a gut level. We walked through a bright, spotless living room flooded with afternoon sun. As we moved, Mark lowered his voice slightly and leaned in closer to Camille, still speaking in French. "So," he said, his eyes roaming over the walls, "remind me why we're really here. You said there's a hidden room, completely soundproof, right?" The words slammed into me like a physical blow. A hidden room, completely soundproof. I stopped near the big bay window, pretending to be absorbed in the light, shielding my eyes with my hand like I was just admiring the view. Inside, every nerve in my body snapped to attention. Camille shot me a quick glance. I gave her my best harmless, slightly vacant American smile. She turned back to Mark and lowered her voice further. "Yes," she answered in French. "It's in the basement. It has a separate electrical line. And of course, it isn't in the official records. That's what you wanted." I felt the blood drain from my face. In an instant, the wife looking at crown molding disappeared, and the risk manager stepped in. I wasn't looking at a house anymore. I was looking at a concealed asset with a hidden power supply and no paper trail. That is the kind of room people build when they never want anyone to know what happens inside. Mark kept going, his voice light and relaxed, like a man planning a surprise party, not a crime. "Perfect," he said in French. "And make sure you don't mention any of this in front of my wife. It's just a little personal project, a surprise. And when the time comes, I need everything to point back to Elise Steele. You understand?" Hearing my name in that context, calmly slotted into some unknown plan as the final destination, made my grip tighten on the window frame. My name was being used as a tool in something I knew nothing about. Camille assured him that the room was still intact, accessed through a hidden entrance in the basement. With a custom lock from the previous owner that still worked, it had never been dismantled. My training clicked in. Panic is useless. Panic gets people caught. My job, professionally and now personally, is to absorb shock, stay rational, and map risk. I turned away from the window and slipped my slightly overwhelmed homeowner mask back on. In English, I asked casually, "Honey, what about the roof? It looked kind of old from the street. And the plumbing? Did you ask about the warranty?" My voice was a little too bright, a little too cheerful, but steady. Mark switched back to English with zero effort, gave me a patronizing smile, and patted my shoulder. "Don't worry your pretty head about the technical stuff. Babe, Camille will send us the inspection reports. The place is solid." He gave Camille a look that said, "See? She just cares about the roof. Nothing dangerous here." I kept smiling, but my mind was racing. Separate electrical line, full soundproofing, not on any official documents, and my name, explicitly attached to whatever this was going to be. We moved upstairs. I stood in the sunny hallway, looking down the polished staircase. Below, Mark and Camille stood near the entrance, their heads close, chatting easily in French. From up there, they looked like normal people doing normal business, but I translated every word in my head. They talked about secure connections, equipment, moving the funds offshore before the end of the quarter. It clicked. Standing in what Mark imagined would be our dream home, I realized it was never meant to be a home for me. It was designed to be a cage and a crime scene, with my name all over it. My marriage hadn't just taken a bad turn, it had turned into a setup. The drive back felt like an hour trapped inside my own skull. 25 minutes in an SUV with a man who'd turned into a stranger in front of me without changing his face or his voice. The terror of what I'd heard, mixed with something older and deeper. The reason I had buried my French fluency in the first place, in my early 20s, before finance and risk models, I'd been a romantic grad student in Lyon. I fell hard for an art history student who spoke French like it was music. For 2 years, French was our language of love, of secrets, of intimacy. Then it became the language of betrayal. He'd been in debt, mixed up with the wrong people. One night he vanished. No goodbye, no fight, nothing. Just a handwritten note in flawless French thanking me for the memories, and for unknowingly helping him cover his tracks. That wasn't just heartbreak, it was humiliation. It rewired something in me. After that, French became a scar. I could speak it perfectly, but I refused to share it. That part of me was off limits. No boyfriend, no fiancé, no husband needed to know. So when I met Mark at a fintech conference in New York, a polished, successful entrepreneur with a clean, tech-centered career, I edited my story, no Lyon, no art student, no French, just Elise, the risk manager from the Midwest with Scandinavian roots and a talent for catching problems before they blew up, sitting in that car, watching traffic slide by. I replayed our marriage like a forensic analyst, how he'd always laughed off the idea of fully merging finances. "You're too good at shutting down risk," he'd tease. "I have to keep a few secrets just to stay interesting." I thought it was cute. Now it felt like a confession. He broke the silence first. "So," he said lightly, "what do you think? I really think that house is perfect for us." I watched him carefully. I needed to see if there was even a flicker of concern that I might have understood too much. "It's beautiful," I said, as if weighing it, "but the basement felt a little dark. Did you see down there? Is it just a utility room?" Mark laughed easily. "Oh, that? Just storage. I must have misunderstood something earlier. Nothing special. We'll turn it into a great wine cellar if you want." A simple, stupid lie. A lie that ignored everything I'd heard. He wasn't just hiding something. He was actively constructing an alternate reality where I stayed ignorant, that night, lying next to him in bed. His breathing no longer sounded comforting. It sounded like a countdown. Once I was sure he was asleep, I slid out of bed, opened my laptop, and started digging. I checked public property records for the house. No structural changes, no permits for any major renovations, nothing that suggested an additional room. The hidden space really was off the books. Then a memory surfaced from our wedding day. 8 months earlier, during the reception, he'd been talking quietly to a friend from Geneva. I'd only caught one line. "Don't worry, this is the last operation. Everything is secure now." Back then, I figured he meant marriage, as in, last big move before settling down. Now, in the context of a hidden, soundproof room and offshore transfers, it sounded like criminal risk management. The terrifying question was simple. What exactly did he plan to do in that hidden room? Run illegal servers? Hide cash? Coordinate crimes? Or something much darker? I wanted to shake him awake, confront him in perfect French, and watch his face fall apart, but that would be emotional, and emotional is sloppy. I needed information first. Proof, something no one could twist. I decided on a strategy. I wouldn't confront him, not yet. I would let him finish building his trap, and I'd record every step. He thought the war hadn't started. It had. The next morning, I gave the performance of my life. I woke up smiling, too bright, too happy. I leaned against the counter while he made coffee and said, "Mark, I can't stop thinking about that house. The light in the bedroom, the little garden. I want it. Let's put in an offer today. I want to move in as soon as we can." The relief on his face was almost painful to watch. His shoulders dropped, the tightness at his jaw. Stress I now knew was tied to logistics and secrecy, not work. Dissolved. "I told you it was meant to be," he said, pulling me in for a long, satisfied kiss. He thought he'd pulled it off. He thought his lie had landed. That afternoon, we sat in Camille's sleek downtown office signing paperwork. The room smelled like money, expensive stationery and designer perfume. Mark and Camille traded quick bursts of French, basic logistics, timeline, closing details. My ears weren't just listening, they were pattern matching. I caught the words servers, security, and no official trace, confirmation. The hidden room would be a data hub, not a wine cellar. At one point, Mark stepped outside to take a call from Dubai. The second he left, I turned to Camille and played the friendly, slightly shallow American. We chatted in English about the basement dimensions and the arches leading to the garage. I listened. I smiled. I let her think I was harmless. Then, once I'd lulled her, I casually slipped in a single French phrase. I complimented the architecture in a way that sounded like something memorized from a travel app. Her whole body went rigid for half a second. Her eyes flicked to my face, trying to decide if she'd misheard. I laughed nervously. "I've been trying to learn a few phrases for fun," I said in English, self-deprecating. "I probably butchered that. I just love how French sounds. Did I say it right?" She relaxed. She wanted to believe I was just dabbling. "Perfect," she said carefully. "You should keep practicing." She dropped the subject as fast as she could. She didn't want to look any deeper than she had to. The house closed. The trap was set. But it wasn't for me. The move was noisy and messy. Boxes, bubble wrap, photos for social media of our first night in the new house. To everyone watching online, we looked like the perfect young couple building a coastal dream life. Underneath all the normal chaos, I was laying the groundwork for survival. In my job, I work with specialists, people who understand what happens when things go very, very wrong. I called one of them. Her name was Nora Hayes. She ran a boutique security firm that specialized in discreet surveillance. Not corporate systems, private systems, the kind that catch cheating spouses or dishonest employees and stand up in court. We met in a quiet cafe far from my usual routes. No small talk. I have reason to believe my husband is about to use our new house as the center of a major financial crime, I told her calmly. And I have reason to believe he is structuring that crime to make me look like the mastermind. If this blows up, the paper trail will point directly to me as the director of risk management. Without video and audio that proves his intent and my ignorance, I go to prison. Her skeptical look disappeared. She listened, really listened. I told her about the hidden room, the separate electrical line, the non-recorded space, the offshore comments, my name. She nodded slowly. "We can work with this," she said. We mapped out a plan. Micro cameras in key areas. Living room, kitchen, garage, hallway near the basement. One camera positioned with surgical precision to see the hidden entrance behind the basement bookcase. All feeds routed to an encrypted app on my phone and backed up to a secure server Mark could never reach. The opportunity to install came when Mark announced a quick business trip to Atlanta. 48 hours, he said, kissing my forehead. Don't miss me too much. Nora's team arrived in plain uniforms labeled as a local power company. Routine inspection and line check before full occupancy. No one questioned it. For 4 hours they wired the house. When they left, nothing looked different. Later that night, after the neighborhood quieted, I went to the basement alone. The air smelled like cement and dust. The bookcase stood against the wall, solid and old-fashioned. I rested my palm against the wood, knowing there was a doorway behind it. On my phone, the camera feed showed the same bookcase from above. "What are you hiding in there, Mark?" I whispered. "You tried to build a trap for me. I'm going to turn it into a spotlight on you." For the first few days, nothing happened. I checked the feeds constantly. I watched Mark make coffee, watch financial news, work at his laptop. I watched myself pretending everything was normal. I saw him move boxes into the basement but never touch the bookcase. I started to wonder if I'd overreacted. Maybe it was just a secret server room for gray area tax stuff. Unethical, sure, but not $35 million level criminal. Then, about 10 days after we moved in, my phone buzzed with an alert close to midnight. Movement detected. Basement. Mark had texted me 10 minutes earlier that he was going for a late-night run. I was alone upstairs on the couch. I opened the app. The basement feed came up. Mark walked into frame wearing dark clothes, not running gear. He moved straight to the bookcase, reached behind it, and pressed something. The entire unit pivoted open with a soft mechanical sound, revealing a dark concrete room beyond. 2 men stepped in behind him. Both looked like they belonged in private bank ads. Expensive suits, slick hair, cold faces. They spoke to Mark in low voices, in French, the kind of French that doesn't happen in tourist cafes, the kind used in back offices and back rooms. Bits of conversation floated up through the microphone. Dedicated server, secure line, offshore transfer. They talked about clients, rich clients, some of them linked to my own firm, Meridian Cove Capital, investors who wanted to move money where the government couldn't easily find it, tax evasion, laundering. They kept using a phrase that made my stomach flip. "She'll sign it. She always signs it. She's the risk director." Mark spoke with disgusting confidence. "The risk is low," he told them. "I have my wife, director of risk. She can tweak a few words in the documents, make the transactions look like clerical errors or misclassified funds. On paper, it will all lead straight to her." One of the men asked what would happen if the feds investigated. Mark didn't hesitate. "All the records point to her. She signs final approval. I'm just the supportive husband who helped her with stressful work. Everyone will believe she was fooled." I sat on our bed upstairs, watching my life burn down on a 6-inch screen. It got worse. Over the next hours, they brought equipment into the hidden room. Battery backups, network hardware, external drives. Mark set up the system like an artist working on his masterpiece. He typed long strings of code and passwords into the console that no one else saw. This was his private kingdom. At one point, as they were leaving, Mark paused and looked straight up toward the corner where the tiniest camera sat. My heart stopped. He stared for 3 long seconds, his face blank, then dismissed it and shut the bookcase. He didn't know, not yet, but the war was fully live now, and I had my first real evidence. The next work week, I turned my professional skills on myself. At Meridian Cove, I pulled my own digital records, every email, every transaction, every approval. I focused on the high-risk offshore accounts Mark had nudged me toward approving quickly over the last few months. Buried deep in some of those files were weird attachments, blank pages, corrupted files, random data packets that made no sense in a normal profile. Then I cross-checked the approval timestamps against my personal calendar. 3 approvals had my signature at times when I physically couldn't have reviewed them, once during a Saturday movie date, once during a dinner out, and once while I was in the shower before work. Mark had helped with my laptop plenty of times. "Just checking the score," he'd say. "Just answering an email for you, babe." He hadn't been checking scores. He'd been logging into my work system with my credentials and authorizing fraudulent accounts. If the feds came in that day, the evidence would bury me. The data would say I'd been the insider architect. The urge to run was powerful. I imagined dumping my accounts, disappearing, changing my name, but I knew what that would look like on paper. Guilty people run, innocent ones build a record. At home, I kept playing the role. He'd come up behind me, wrap his arms around me, talk about baby names, future vacations, retirement plans. I'd stand there, every muscle tight, wondering if any of it was ever real or if it was all part of the act. One night over wine, he looked at me with that soft, intense gaze people fall in love with and said, "You know why I married you, Elise? Because you're the smartest woman I know. I just hope you never get smarter than me." He said it like a joke. It wasn't. That was the moment I understood this wasn't just about escaping prison. It was about reclaiming my story. Watching the cameras wasn't enough. I needed a counter-narrative, something bigger than his. I bought a small leather notebook, the kind I usually used for high-stakes meeting notes. I started documenting everything by hand: dates, times, exact phrases, account numbers, names, all of it. Then I did something even more important. I got that notebook out of my house. I drove 20 miles and left it, sealed in an envelope, in the fireproof safe of my oldest friend from law school. A woman who understood what "open only if something bad happens" means. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror that night, under bright lights. My face looked older than it had a month ago. Tired, but harder, too. There was no victim left in my eyes. I whispered to my own reflection, in my head, and in the language Mark thought he owned. A promise he would never hear. "You think you're trapping me. We'll see." If Mark wanted a gullible wife to blame, then that's exactly what I was going to give him, on the surface. I dialed up the Sweet Dependent Spouse Act. I started asking his opinion on everything: clothes, paint colors, random work topics. "You're so good at this big picture stuff," I'd say, sounding a little insecure. "Do you think I should approve this new European client? The regulations are so confusing. I'm afraid I'll mess it up." He loved it. My fake helplessness went straight to his ego. The more I leaned on him, the more confident he became that I was fully under his control. Soon he was bringing me documents, temporary authorizations, and simple proxies that he claimed would help him communicate more easily with my foreign clients on my behalf. "Just sign here, babe," he'd say. "This lets me answer some preliminary compliance questions in case you're busy. Totally standard." I signed. Then, when he wasn't looking, I took pictures of every single page with my phone. Every clause, every authorization, every trick line that tried to tie my identity to his transactions. Meanwhile, Nora was backing up all the footage remotely, and she introduced me to someone I desperately needed: a financial crimes attorney named Amelia Grant. Amelia was sharp, calm, and terrifying in the best possible way. In her office, I laid everything out: The video, the translations, the suspicious approvals, the forged digital trail. I told her exactly what I wanted. I don't just want him convicted of fraud, I said quietly. I want the record to show that he planned to use our marriage and my job as his shield. I wanted on paper that I was the target, not the partner. We built a strategy. Step 1. Keep collecting evidence. Step 2. Let him get comfortable and go as far as he possibly could. Step 3. Position me legally not as a panicked spouse but as an internal whistleblower, under Amelia's direction. I started drafting emails at work. Unsent drafts to my boss and to the internal audit committee, time-stamped and saved, expressing vague concern about certain offshore clients and processes. I didn't send them yet, but the drafts existed, with dates, proving that my instincts were raising flags before any raid. At home, I kept playing my role. Mark kept building his. One night he came upstairs practically buzzing. He smelled like concrete and electrical heat. "It's all ready," he told me, pacing. "My associate, Louis, is flying in tomorrow. The final transfer happens tomorrow night. This is it, babe, decision night." I stepped out onto the balcony, my chest tight. I pulled out my phone and messaged Amelia through our encrypted app. "He says tomorrow night is the decision night. I'm ready." Friday night hit heavy and humid. At 11:45 p.m., my phone buzzed with the now familiar basement alert. Minutes earlier, Mark had texted me from the driveway saying he had an emergency flight to Atlanta and would be gone until Sunday. I already knew his phone's location hadn't left the property. I opened the app. There he was in the hidden room with the 2 men from before, and a 4th man I recognized immediately from news articles. A disgraced French banker named Louis, who had narrowly escaped charges in a European scandal years earlier. Computers glowed, numbers flowed across screens, the room hummed with fans and electricity. Mark's voice came through the speakers, tight with excitement. "This is it," he said in French. "The final transfer, $35 million. We push everything into the account under Elise's name. When the dust settles, she'll be the perfect scapegoat. $35 million. He raised a glass in a toast. "To marriage," he joked darkly. "The cheapest insurance policy in the world. No one ever suspects the sweet wife." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I executed, on my laptop. I triggered the emergency data transfer plan Amelia and I had set up. Every frame of video, every word of audio, every visible account number, and the exact timing of the transfer were sent to her secure server and to a federal Dropbox the agents had already established. A message came back from Amelia almost instantly. "Do not go downstairs. Do not go home. Stay clean. We're moving." I still had one thing left to do: nail down my alibi. I sat down at my work laptop at home and opened my email. I finally sent one of those draft messages to my boss and the audit committee, expressing concern about anomalies in offshore accounts and asking for a full review. Then I grabbed my keys and left the house. I drove straight to Meridian Cove's headquarters downtown. I swiped into the lobby. I let the security cameras see me. I went to my floor, sat at my desk, opened documents, and moved my mouse. I stayed just long enough to leave a clear digital and visual footprint. At the moment, the crime was happening in my basement. I was at the bank, acting like a responsible director. On my phone, propped against my monitor. The basement feed kept playing. I saw Mark and his associates celebrating. The final transfer executed. $35 million routed into an account with my name as the authorized contact. Then, in another feed, I saw flashing blue and red outside the house. Law enforcement had arrived. The basement was soundproof. Mark had no idea. He lifted his glass again and laughed. "It's done," he shouted. "The future is ours, and we're untouchable." In reality, the no-knock warrant was about to turn his untouchable into under arrest. The call from Amelia came while I was still at my desk at the bank. "It's done," she said. "They breached the basement. Everyone is in custody." I drove straight from work to the federal building. The house, my house, was now a sealed crime scene I couldn't go near. Inside the federal building, I was met not by handcuffs, but by my attorney and a team of investigators. They led me into a small room with a metal table and offered me water. My hands shook, but my voice stayed even. I told them everything. From the first house tour to the final toast, I translated every French phrase I remembered. I handed over my notebook. I signed statements. I answered questions. Meanwhile, back at the house, the picture was very different. Agents rushed the basement. They found Mark and the three men in front of live screens and humming servers, cables everywhere, transaction logs on display. $35 million mid-jump. Someone tried to yank a power cable. It didn't matter. Forensic techs were already imaging drives and freezing the digital environment. Mark tried to spin himself as the victim and me as the mastermind almost immediately. "My wife knew everything," he shouted. "She's the risk director. Check the records. Her name is on all of it." That reaction wasn't a surprise. It was part of Amelia's prediction. At the federal building, after my initial statement, they asked me to sit in a hallway and wait while they processed more evidence. That's when they walked Mark past me in handcuffs. He looked wrecked, hair messy, face pale, eyes wild. He glanced up and his gaze locked on mine. In that second, I watched it happen in his eyes. The realization, the French, the conversations, the house tour, the trial to come. He understood I had never been ignorant. He understood he had built his entire plan on an assumption that was wrong. He opened his mouth to say something, but the guard pulled him away. For the first time in weeks, I felt my chest loosen. Not happiness, not triumph, just relief that this part was over. The rest would be public. The trial of Mark, Louis, and the others rocked Charleston, on paper. The case looked messy at first. My login, my approvals, my title, his charm, his supposedly clueless tech background. His lawyers argued that I was the true architect, a cold, ambitious risk director who'd used her husband's skills to build a shadow system. But facts are stubborn. When I took the stand, I explained exactly how internal approvals worked. I showed how someone with access to my laptop and passwords, and an opportunity when I was distracted, could approve things under my identity without my knowledge. The defense tried to drag me. They questioned why I'd never told Mark I spoke French. They tried to turn my privacy into something shady. I told the truth. I explained my past in Lyon, the betrayal, and how French had become a line I refused to cross in new relationships. They didn't make me look suspicious. They made me look human. Then it was the prosecution's turn to bring in their own surprise. Camille, the realtor. She took the stand, clearly uncomfortable. The prosecutor started to ask her questions in English, and that's when I decided to do the one thing Mark never expected. I asked the judge's permission to address the witness briefly. He allowed it. I turned to Camille, not to the jury, not to the judge, and repeated, in English this time, but very clearly marked as what he had said in French. The exact words Mark had used in her presence during the showing. "Do you remember?" I asked. "When Mark asked you, speaking in French, about the real reason we were there? When he confirmed there was a hidden, soundproof room with its own electrical line? When he told you, again in French, that eventually everything needed to point back to me, to Elise Steele?" The courtroom went dead quiet. The interpreter confirmed that what I'd just described matched the meaning of the original conversation. Camille stared at the table and finally admitted that yes, Mark had said those things. Yes, she had understood. Yes, she had known the room wasn't in the official records. That was the first crack. The second came with another witness, a French investor named Isabelle. She testified that years earlier, Mark had run a fund overseas using the same pattern, elevating a woman into a visible compliance role, then dumping liability onto her when things went bad. I wasn't his first target. I was just the one who documented him. Finally, the star witness took the stand. The evidence itself, under Amelia's direction, the prosecution played the basement footage. They translated every line. They showed Mark designing the hidden room, running the servers, bragging about his plan to push everything into an account in my name and let me take the fall. When his attorneys tried to argue that the cameras were an invasion of marital privacy, the judge shut them down. As a co-owner of the house trying to protect herself from an anticipated felony, I was absolutely within my rights to record common areas. Cornered. Mark snapped. He stood up, yelling. He cursed me out in French, loud enough that the interpreter didn't even need a microphone. The judge threatened to have him removed. The jury saw the real man behind the charm. It didn't take them long. Guilty. On fraud. On money laundering. On conspiracy. On deliberately attempting to frame his spouse. His co-conspirators were also convicted. I was fully exonerated and officially recognized as a cooperating witness and internal whistleblower. Meridian Cove released a carefully worded public statement about strengthening internal controls and privately thanked me for exposing the breach. On the last day in court, as the marshals moved him, Mark glanced at me one final time and asked in a strained voice, in French, if I had understood him from the very beginning. I answered calmly, in English, so the entire room could understand. Yes, and you never once tried to understand me. Outside the courthouse, Camille found me and tearfully apologized. I didn't tell her it was okay. I didn't scream at her either. I just said, "Next time, trust your conscience more than your commission." Isabel shook my hand, and we shared a quiet, strange moment as two women who had both been targeted by the same man and still walked away. Then I stepped out into the Charleston light and salt air. The cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. I took off my wedding ring, waited in my hand for a second, then slipped it into the inner pocket of my blazer, not as a keepsake, as evidence, a reminder. Silence is expensive. Trust without verification is dangerous. And underestimating a woman who speaks more languages than she shows is a fatal mistake. I walked down those courthouse steps not as Mark's wife, not as a victim, not as a scapegoat, but as the person who saw the risk, mapped it, and took it down. Thank you so much for staying with me to the end of this story. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I love seeing where the Lila Revenge Stories family is watching around the world. Don't forget to like this video. Subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories for more intense, satisfying tales of justice, and hit that hype button so this story can reach even more people.